In our previous video, we cloned this job, or this job that we see now is the result of cloning another job. You recall that we use cloning, and that saves a tremendous amount of time when you want to create another job with many of the same properties as the job that you have created previously. So here we have the job. We've got the job. We're looking for one candidate to fill the enrolled nurse position for 2 days from 1800 to 2300 in the afternoon. We can see immediately that the job's unallocated, and we can see that the job is unpublished. So let's open that job and look at the schedule. Now when you come to the schedule, the first thing you're going to do, I believe, is open your plus. You see a plus here because you know that you've got to add somebody to the schedule, and then you can view different groups of individuals based on certain criteria. So let me take you through that now. So an employee, in Recruit Complete, we talk about employees and contractors at the same time. To us, they are one and the same. An employee is somebody, an individual that has worked for you previously. By definition, if they've worked for you previously, they have a timesheet that they have completed previously. That's how we identify them as an employee. And when we select employee, the system will return all those individuals who have worked for you previously, maybe not necessarily as an enrolled nurse, but have worked for you previously and meet all of the requirements of the job. You will recall that for this job we stated that the candidates or the contractors needed to have a Cert 1 in health, and that means by definition all the employees turning up here have a Cert 1 in health. If I had specified more than one requirement on the job, maybe we had a different license, maybe a different certificate or competency and skill, if those individuals don't meet all of those requirements, they wouldn't turn up here. They have to meet all of them. It's as simple as that. So these employees, while they may not have worked as an enrolled nurse, are available and meet all of the requirements of the job. Because what we're going to be able to show you shortly is we can just drag people from this list and allocate them into the roster if we want, or send them an invitation to accept the roster. So before we do that, let's just explain some of these other groups that we've got. Historical, by definition, the historical employees, contractors, are a subset of your employee group that I just showed you. Historical means, again, they have to meet all of the requirements of the job, but they also have to have previously worked as an enrolled nurse sometime in the past. So I tend to think that this is the first place you'll come, and if you don't find the people that you want here, then you'll go and look elsewhere, maybe some of these other groups of employees, to decide who you want to allocate to the roster. So that's my historical. I'm going to deal with applicants last because that'll make it a little bit clearer after I've explained the following. So when you have prospects, a prospect is any individual that has not worked for you at all in the past, but meet one or more requirements of the job. So again, I repeat, this job had only one requirement, that was the Cert 1 in health. Therefore, any prospect that turns up in here by definition must have a Cert 1 in health. However, imagine we had a Cert 1 in health, but we also maybe had a license certificate required as well. If a candidate has a Cert 1 in health or has the particular license, they'll turn up here because, I repeat, they only need to meet one of the requirements of the job to turn up here. Because you can still, even though they're a candidate that never worked for you, I can still drag this person into the roster, and then I can accept them into the roster. And then what's going to happen is, we'll just do that. So I drag this person into the roster, Henry Johns. They immediately, we can see they've popped from straight into here into the accepted pipeline stage. There is a rule on the accepted pipeline stage for this example where we've said that if a person, an individual, is accepted into a schedule and this individual is not an employee, then create them as an employee role. Now what that means is that when you come to the next job and you go employee, then this candidate will turn up there because they are now an employee, and they'll also turn up in your historical list because they're now somebody who's worked this job previously. So let's just reallocate. I'll explain this again later, but I'll just take that person off the roster. So that's my prospects. My compliant list is a subset of my prospects. It's exactly the same in the prospects in the sense that these individuals have not worked for you previously. They do not have an employee role. I can drag them in here and just like I did from the prospects, be created as an employee role. The difference here is the compliance meet all of the requirements of the job, not one or more of the requirements. So the compliant is a fine-tuned subset of my prospect list. So really, I think you'd be looking at historical, who's historically worked for me in this position, who meets the requirements. If I can't find them there, who has worked for me previously but not necessarily as an enrolled nurse but meets all the requirements. If I still don't find who I want there, then I can go to my compliant list and look for any candidates in my database that meet all of the requirements of the job. And that's the main list that I will deal with. But likewise, I can also look at my talent pool. Now think of talent pool as hot lists. Previously, you've identified, or a recruiter in your business has identified, that Barney Goods is a good quality candidate and should be considered for the enrolled nurse pay point position. So that means that every time we create a job for an enrolled nurse pay point, all of these hot listed candidates will turn up here. And then you can even drag your hot list into here. The difference with your hot list, they might not have any of the requirements of the job, but maybe for some reason you've identified them as the perfect candidate. We haven't yet got their profiles up to date like we want them to be, so we can drag them in with knowledge that they meet the requirements. So that's our talent pool. And then finally is interested. So interested is when you have got any employees that have identified themselves, or sorry, not employees, my apologies, candidates. Candidates have come to your website, they've registered on your website, they haven't applied for this particular job, but they've identified that they are interested in any opportunities to work as an enrolled nurse pay point 1. So if you've got any candidates that have done that, then they will turn up here. So I'm going to deal with these grids, in case you're wondering what these are for. I'm going to deal with those a little bit differently because they're sort of less important for my temp jobs as they are for my permanent jobs. Jobs that you are advertising and you are looking to fill, so therefore they are turning up on your careers page, as against a temporary job, which I tend to think you'll always operate with these grids as we do here. So following my sort of summation, we would select our historical. We would look at these people who historically have worked, who are available to work on this job, and we can allocate them to the job. So now, and by definition, none of these candidates are working on other jobs. They are available to work. If they weren't available, we wouldn't see them turning up here. So I grab Abby Mayer, for example, and I say I want her onto the shift. So I can accept her. I can do two things. I can send an invitation to Abby, or I can accept her directly into the position. So for the moment, let's just accept her into the position. Abby is now fully rostered. She is scheduled on the roster. So what does that mean? As soon as we've got her scheduled on the roster, we can do a couple of things. She's registered on the 30th of June to the 1st of April. So we can see her in our wider schedule. So we'll just we'll open up our schedule now. Sort of just showing you just what it means once we've got the person on the roster. So if we look at our schedule, there's Abby Smith sitting in the oncology on the Wednesday the 30th, rostered, ready to go. This is where you see the schedule for all jobs that you've got. You can filter it by particular jobs, but this is essentially your ability to see all of your contractors and where they're working and scheduled on any given day. So here what we'll do, and then if you jump to Abby Mayer's personal profile, and if Abby can log in and she can see this herself, we can see that what she's working on the Wednesday. We can see that in here. We can see it on the week. So we'll just go through the week, and there's her working on those days from 15 hours on her schedule. Now we've got the schedule. She can see the schedule here. She can open the schedule, and we'll go back to the job. So Abby's on the job. Now there's some things you can do from here. You can view what Abby's going to get paid already. We've calculated that. That's really cool because it means that we're pretty much done in terms of payroll and invoicing. All you need to know now is that they actually work what we scheduled them to work, and that's the process of the timesheets. And we're going to deal with that in a subsequent video. But here we've got Abby. If I decide that I don't want Abby on the shift for some reason, I made a mistake, I can reallocate that shift. Note you cannot reallocate a person off a schedule if they have submitted a timesheet for that schedule. But up until they submit a timesheet for that schedule, you can reallocate that job to another candidate. So here I'll go back, and now what we'll do is we'll grab a historical, and this time we'll put Brian Mackle on the job. So we'll just drag Brian Mackle into the job. The difference about Brian, interestingly enough, is something that I described in the last video, in the video when we were talking about creating the properties for a job, is the job in this case was for a casual. But Brian is not a casual. He's a part-time employee, and by definition, therefore, may get paid a higher rate than was set as the pay rate on the job, because the job pay rate was based on a casual. So this is a nice warning that is telling you, hey, do you realize you're actually putting a candidate on this job that is going to get paid more than the rate that you've defined on the job when you created it? That's important because potentially that's going to harm your margin. And if that's the case, you're able to come in here and you can edit and change the charge rate for Brian on this job if that was the case. Because sometimes what's going to happen is you just don't have the casuals available and you've got to go to your more expensive pool. That's the process that the system uses to look after you if that condition exists. So anyway, we grab Bryony and we can accept Bryony. So that's the way we've taken one candidate off the job and we've put a new candidate on the job. So again, we can open Bryony up. We can look at what she's going to get paid, and we've got her on the schedule. So that is the process of allocating people to the schedule. Now, before we leave, let's just talk a little bit about the prospect and the talent pool. If I've got no employees, I've got no historical employees, I just don't have enough people to fill the job, maybe I can then go to my prospects and I can drag them into the pipeline or drag them into the job and accept them directly. However, there will be times when you can't drag the prospect into the job directly because we need them to complete some registration, complete their induction, go through the process of the workflow before such time as we can do that. And that's what we use these grids for. So here's the same prospect. Here's Penelope Tata again. So if I want to get her into the process, I want to get her through so that she is fully inducted and ready to be put on the job, because I don't have enough employees have worked or qualified. I don't have any historical workers. Well, I can look at my prospect list. So here I can just go prospect and I can take this person directly into the registration phase of the pipeline. So now that she's registered, then she has essentially become an applicant on the job. So there she is on the job, and you can see that we've created her registration application form and we're ready to do a confirm for working with children. So this is the way in which Penelope has been taken into the role. So you can do that with, and therefore now what we treat her as an applicant. So now when I go schedule and I look at my applicants, Penelope's turning up here. And Penelope's turning up here because she's in the process as an applicant in this process, and she is now able to complete a registration and go through it, and then we can allocate her into the role as well. So that's an example where you take people out of your prospect list and you take them directly into one of your pipeline stages. Likewise, you can add them directly to your talent pool, and then they turn up in your talent pool and you can view them in your pipeline. So if they were added into your talent pool, so here we see all our people in the talent pool, we can see that Penelope's already gone through to reference check because she had already done her registration, her right to work check's been completed, she's sitting a reference check. So there's an example of taking somebody through the process, and here we can see our other people in the talent pool. So this is the way you can access your pipeline directly from your job. So if we said, oh, well, actually, Adam King, I want to get them into registration now, I can just chuck them into registration as I'm starting to build up the different people that maybe can fill this job. Again, this process really is only required if you do not have the employees who have historically worked for you or have the qualifications required to fill the job, because typically that's where you'll be going. So then we can see a reference, we can see the registration for that candidate, and we can see Penelope sitting in reference check. And then of course when we go into the schedule, if I deallocate now, just sort of take Bryony off, close that, open this up, look at my applicants. We only see Penelope. You might wonder, why don't we see what's happening with our registration here? So if we look at our registration list, we can see Adam King. Well, the reason is because Adam King, while he's now in the registration phase and by definition applicant, he doesn't have the requirements of the job, doesn't meet them, doesn't have the certificate, hence is not available as an applicant to be scheduled onto the job. So normally you might wait till Penelope has gone through to induction. That's entirely up to you, and it really is based on the way that you've created your various pipelines. But that's how we get our candidates into the schedule. You can also do this. You can say, if I go into my historical list and I've got Abby Smith, and I drag Abby Smith into the roster, I can send Abby an invitation. So now Abby has got an invitation. And then when we look at Abby's profile, in this case here, we look at the schedule, see she's got this invitation sitting in here for the day. So there, this is so I'll go just to the next. Oh, there we are. There's the invitation. I got a bit concerned then. So there's our invitation. If Abby wanted to accept the invitation, she could come in here and simply accept the invitation, and then Abby is then placed. But notice she's conflicts with the shift, please select another candidate. So we need to go back and fix that conflict. You can invite one or more candidates to as an invitation into the roster. You can also, and then the first person to accept the invitation gets the job. Right, so let's go back in and just repeat. So again, we'll just sort of go through that process. If we've got somebody that's in the roster that we don't want, or we made a mistake, or we want to change, we reallocate. I think I've already mentioned that when you reallocate somebody, it removes them from the roster. But if that candidate has submitted a timesheet for the day that for that roster that you're reallocating, you can no longer reallocate them, because by definition they've submitted a timesheet, they've worked on the schedule, so they can't be reallocated. So yeah, select your employee from here, your employees, or select your historical list. Either way, grab your candidate that you want to put on the job. In this case, Bryony Bindle. Accept her. You have now filled the job. We've already calculated what we're going to pay the person, as we can see here. And then the next stage is to create timesheets and go through the timesheet process, both from a candidate's perspective and the approver's perspective, to then generate our invoice and our payroll in relation to that job. So that's where we'll go into timesheets. So in the next video, we're going to discuss timesheets, generating timesheets, adding timesheets, and then later we'll be talking about generating manual invoices on a job as well, because sometimes you're going to want a job where you want to add some manual charges which aren't generated by the hours that they worked. So thank you for spending the time, and hopefully this explains how, once you've created your job and you've created your schedule, how you can allocate the right people to that job. Thank you very much.